guest edited by Shikha Sani Lamba, we are putting together a special Matchbox issue. We Are Here. Writings by and about Afghan women. Memory is fickle, news moves on, and in the face of the innumerable conflicts across the world, we want to remind our readers that Afghan women have been resisting for decades, and they have been and are still right here. Few days back, on the 19th August, Afghanistan commemorated its sovereignty. Today, the graveyard of empires is also a graveyard to the stories of women, ethnic minorities, who were but collateral damage in wars of imperialism and greed of power. This makes us rethink, what does independence, freedom, and sovereignty mean when we think from Afghanistan and South Asia? In this talk, we are welcoming acclaimed author Nadia Hashimi for a conversation at Usawa Talks. Nadia Hashimi is a pediatrician, novelist, and a former Democratic congressional candidate for the United States House of Representatives for Maryland's 6th Congressional District. She is the author of 3 international bestsellers: The Pearl That Broke Its Shell, When the Moon is Low, and A House Without Windows, all told from the female gaze of Afghan women. Welcome, Nadia. We are really happy to have you here.
So glad to be here. Thank you.
Nadia, we were thinking of what sisterhood means, in the context of the Taliban rule or, any kind of governance when they strip women and girl children of the very basic, the very fundamental personhood. How do women come together? What does sisterhood mean in that sense? I mean, we've read a lot of this in your books. Do tell us from your literary lens as well as from, the humanity lens.
Yeah, I think, when we take a look at what sisterhood means in the context of such a drastic situation such as Afghanistan, look at what the Taliban did when they first came in. A few of the sites that they banned from access for women were the beauty salons, right? The gyms, the parks, the public parks, right? And these are places where women would gather. And that is a huge clue, including, classrooms and all of that. But even in the social settings, they've banned women from certain aspects of society. And in particular, the beauty salons, what is the purpose of that? Well, one of the purposes has to be to prevent that sisterhood from flourishing, to prevent those conversations that could happen, the dialogue that could be exchanged there, where women could actually come together, exchange ideas, support one another. And so it is this fracturing of the fabric of women and eliminating those places where they can actually exist and exist together that has been so strategic for them and important. And that's where we can turn it around and say, so then what is sisterhood? Where could sisterhood flourish? And it is in those spaces where women are allowed to just come together, just to be, not even to organize politically, but to be able to share their experiences, share their wisdom, share their knowledge, collaborate together. And then from there, there's a natural growth of an actual movement that means something to those women locally, gives them agency, and gives them some empowerment.
How do you think the Afghan women, the women over there, who have been denied all of this, how are they fighting against it? Because we know that they are, and we are very happy and grateful that they are. So, what spaces have they recreated? What stories come to your mind that, that could give all of us some hope?
So, I think one of the things that has happened is that schools, like they have in the past, have had to go kind of underground.
Mm.
But there is this undercurrent in the country where we still, and even the organizations that I'm supportive of, are we're finding out that they're doing the work. So there may be, pockets here and there of underground classrooms, learning centers, just gatherings that are happening. There are, of course, also some protests that have been happening in the country as well, where there are women who take to the streets in the traditional sense of protest, where we see, signs and chanting slogans and things like that. Those, of course, have been also very dangerous, and that's been fraught for women. There have been many who have been detained, some have been disappeared. And so, the danger level and the risk level is also one that has to be taken into consideration. But protest happens in many different ways. And just today, on my social media scroll, I'm seeing a video of a woman who is covered head to toe in a burqa, but she is showing the camera her certificates, all these degrees, certificates, things that she had achieved in the years before the Taliban had come. And and that is also a protest, saying that you cannot erase what I have achieved, even if they're taking away so many of the opportunities for a woman to use and capitalize on those achievements and that education. So, protest is going to continue, whether it's on social media, in the types of writings that women are doing that will be, reaching your readers, sharing their voices, because so often Afghan women are cast as voiceless or as not having anything to say for themselves and needing others to speak on their behalf. And yet that is not true. If we listen and we're tuning into the right channels, we can hear that Afghan women themselves are voicing protest, and so many who have been spread out now into this widening diaspora who are exiled from the country, these political leaders, entrepreneurs, musicians, artists, filmmakers. These people are now doing the work of activism outside of the borders of their country, outside of their homeland, because that is where they can affect some change.
And, whenever we think of the women, Taliban is not the entire country, right? There are regular men also who must be in relationship with these women, who are in love with these women, who want to protect these women. How have you seen any noticeable change in how men have responded to all of these atrocities against women?
So I think one of the things that you take a look at Afghanistan, and there was a culture of patriarchy there. And if you combine that with literally decades of conflict and fatigue, you combine that with poverty, it's very easy to pull up a recipe where the Taliban can come in and they can lay out this deeply misogynistic system of laws and not have a massive uprising from men, either out of fear or out of just fatigue and not having the capacity. And that's not to say that men haven't stood up and protested. What we saw very early on, for example, were, at the medical school, the men who were students there, they walked out when the women were banned from coming to that medical school as well. There have been people who are advocating, even in smaller circles, to the Taliban that the girls and the women should be allowed to go to school. Even some members of the Taliban who leadership have sent their daughters to school abroad. And so, all of these skirting of the rules shows that there is some belief in there from the men that some girls should be able to go to school. They see the value of it for certain girls, but just not for the entire country where they can have such control. But I think what's going to have to happen is that, if you continue to have countries in the region further legitimize the Taliban because they have economic reasons to, because they want to establish trade, because they want to establish relations, then that sort of diminishes what can happen from within the country. And that's not to give, a free pass. But yes, the men in the country are going to have to step up and support their wives, their daughters, if they want to see real change. We have certain programs with, for example, Sahar, the organization that I'm a part of, where we have men as partners of change. And this happens very slowly, but very organically within the community through these programs where we talk about the importance of, not just sisterhood, but also the bonds between brothers and sisters, between men and their wives, and how important it is for those to be mutually supportive relationships.
Also for the men themselves, right? I mean, there are so many restrictions on men as well. Of course, for women, women have been stripped of, basic, humane existence, their basic
Yeah.
personhood. But even for men, it can't be easy what's going on, right? No matter what their religious beliefs are, no matter how much they support Taliban or are scared of them. So yeah, you're right. I wish we could give some sort of message to the men to step up.
Yeah, I think it will probably come with time. They're also being, suffocated economically. So the families that we're in touch with, they just don't have very many options in terms of, how they can go out and support themselves and what they can do. And so, in like the hierarchy of needs, unfortunately, time and time again, historically, you'll see that women's rights is very low. And I think that's where you need to have more stability, you need to have more peace, you need to have a little bit more capacity before people as a whole start thinking about, well, what about the rights of these women who are around me, who are relying on me to stand up for them, to speak up for them, to stand not really up for them, but to stand with them.
See, I mean, these really atrocious things have been happening since the 70s, right? That's when things started breaking, fracturing, like you said. Have you seen what kind of, this kind of what kind of erasure, what kind of erosion have you noticed in the last 5 decades? It's been a long time. It's half a century.
It's been half a century of conflict, of unrest, and yet, even within that half a century, it has not been in one direction. So there have been a lot of waves of growth, of progress, of things moving in a better direction. You had so many women who have been educated in Afghanistan. You've said so many girls who have been allowed to dream and who do dream. And so some of the writings I'm sure that you will see will reflect those seeds that have been planted in these girls and in these women. And some of it is just inherent. And I feel like, for example, when in 2001, the United States and other countries went into Afghanistan and they got rid of the Taliban, girls were able to go to school again, and women were allowed to do so much more again, including serving in government and having different roles in the public sphere. And so much of it happened quickly, and people were astonished by it. And I think it happened quickly not because it was new and it was exciting, but I think people were relying on muscle memory. They were activating that muscle memory, things that girls and women had been allowed to do before. They were quickly rebounding and trying to make up for all this lost time. And so you had an explosion in the number of girls who were getting an education, including up until right at the end, there was actually one university that graduated more girls than boys in that class, or more women than men. And so the gains were tremendous, albeit maybe focused in cities rather than in, the rural countrysides, but that is to be seen everywhere around the world, right? Cities are naturally centers of progress and change. So it has not been unidirectional in terms of, where we've gone with women's rights. And I think that's where it's been head spinning and not knowing, my gosh, which way is this country moving? Because it has gone in so many different directions. And then, when you think it's going in one way, it does a complete 180. But that, I think those little, notches where we see the progress being made, that cannot be erased. And so these women and girls who are now being shuttered in their homes and banned from engaging, whether it's in journalism or in politics or in the arts, those dreams, they're diminishing, but they're not completely dying. They're still there. And especially fueled by the massive connections that people have because they still have the internet, right? And that has been a gateway to being able to see what's going on in the rest of the world, to being expressive in certain ways, even if they're doing it anonymously. but it's been a channel for people to stay connected so that they're not totally in the dark.
And what do you think that, feminist organize, what can literature and other feminist organizations do to help amplify, just just to sort of acknowledge their struggles and
Yeah. I think, what you are doing in this edition, you are capturing this is a memory, right? So what we're living and experiencing right now is a memory. We're documenting this period of history, and that's, I think, really important um because it might be very easy to imagine that if there's a day where Afghanistan is no longer under this grip of the Taliban, it might be very easy to imagine that these years were not so bad. And so I think it's really important to crystallize, capture what women are saying about this life right now that they're living, that they're experiencing. Even if we're not able to pluck them out of this abyss. But I think it's really important to capture their experiences because years from now, who is to say that it was maybe milder than we're making it out to be. So I think it's really important that we have their voices, that we have their testimony to exactly what it means to live this way. And then beyond that, not just for posterity's sake, but even right now in this urgent moment, these are the voices that can be taken to the people who make decisions, to political leaders, to leaders of companies who are making trade deals with the Taliban, that there should be some sort of leverage here to say, hey, what you're doing is wrong. The problem with us has been, and I speak as us globally, is that, the issue of Afghan women's rights is of importance only sometimes. And so it's the same, right? So what's happening right now is the same as what was happening in the late 90s, that girls were not allowed to go to school. And that is atrocious in and of itself. If we take that alone, it is atrocious to say that girls should not be allowed to get a very basic education. And and yet it was important at certain times. It was important when the United States wanted to conduct a military intervention in Afghanistan, and it's not important now. And so, you've mentioned that memory is fickle, but people are also very fickle about what is a priority, what is a moral imperative, what are our values. Our values change depending on which people we're speaking of, which women are we speaking of, and what is the context. And if there's no economic gain, then there's very little interest in saying that, yes, we should stand with Afghan women. And that's really unfortunate. I think this is a real measure of our moral compass.
with, conflicts growing all across the world. And even within India, even internally, we are seeing so many conflicts. And somehow these conflicts keep growing in numbers, uh, and they don't seem to end anymore. And women and children are the ones who suffer the most. Um, but we are always just reading statistics, news. We never get to know what's actually happening in the daily lives of people. Um, so Nadia, there is something that Anchal has prepared. It's called, a quick question round. Um, with your permission, we'll go to that.
Sure.
What comes to your mind when you think of an Afghan woman?
Oh, I see the color lapis immediately. I'm not sure why, but I think there's something about the lapis stone which is, mined almost distinctly from Afghanistan, and it just has such a bold color. It has different flecks of different minerals in it, and it has such a spirit of calm and strength, and it has traveled the world and been represented in so many different ways that I see a woman sort of draped in lapis.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's poetic. And what do you think that is the greatest longing of the girl children in Afghanistan right now? What do you think they would long for the most?
Meeting some of the children who came from Afghanistan, 4 years ago in the evacuation, I had the opportunity to sit with many of the children to kind of coordinate some classrooms and some sessions with them. And you could see that they were hungry for books. They were hungry for learning. They were eager to come to any kind of classroom that we could fashion for them out of the resources that we had. Pencils, notebooks, worksheets. I remember one girl saying, please, please, can you bring me polynomials? She wanted to work on some more advanced math. And so I absolutely see this hunger for education, for them to be able to dream and see themselves as more than what they are at the moment.
And what do you think is the greatest misunderstanding about Afghan girls and women that you could, if you could change, you could, or something that makes you really, really angry?
Oh, I think it's a shame when people feel like they are meek,
Yeah.
and that this desire for agency is something that has to be taught to them. I actually was on a news program once with a gentleman who had been, I think, an advisor in some regard on the United States side. And when we left the taping of the show, we walked outside and we were standing on with a street in Washington, D.C., and we were just chatting about the situation, and he said to me, well, at least we were able to introduce some women's rights for 20 years. And I said, it was not introduced by the United States. Women's rights did not appear with Americans in Afghanistan. This was something that Afghan women and Afghan society had demanded over time and had been achieved before the United States came in. So I think this is a misconception that, Afghan women are basically just under the whip of a Taliban or under the boot of any man and waiting for somebody to save them. That's not the case at all.
And if you had, if you had three wishes, how would you change Afghanistan today?
Hmm. Um, I would bring equality. I don't think that we need special rights for girls or women. I think we just need equality. I think we need justice for all people. There's been a lot that's happened under cover of night, and everyone who has been wronged deserves justice. And I think access to healthcare, that's been a huge harm on in the entire society, especially with maternal mortality rates and infant mortality rates and just illness. Access to healthcare would be huge.
Now let's come to your works. Do you have any favorite filmmakers if they were to adapt your novels into cinema? Are there some filmmakers or script writers you would like to see working with your novels, on your novels?
Oh, that's a great question. And this can be the beginning of a conversation for anybody who's listening. I don't know. I haven't had anybody in mind. I think it would be interesting to see one of these stories sort of, come to light on a screen. To be honest, when I'm writing a story, I'm usually seeing it as a film in my head, and I'm sort of transcribing the scenes in terms of what I'm envisioning and then trying to capture it onto the page. So it would be interesting to see what the process would feel like or look like going in reverse and translating the story back onto the screen. But we'll just see.
No, we noticed that cinematic quality in your writing actually. Which is why I think Achal came up with this question. That it seems like scenes unfolding in front of our eyes. And we sincerely believe that there are cinema or shows made out of your books. Are there any actresses you would like to see cast as the central women characters, especially Rahima?
Oh, that's hard to say. But I will say that, I'm really glad right now I've been able to see more Afghan American and other Afghan women who have been engaged in cinema on the screens in the United States and, in other countries. We have filmmakers. So however it comes together, it would be really amazing to see some Afghan women portraying some of these roles.
And tell us a little bit about your writing routine. Do you like coffee, tea, chaos, music, or complete silence?
So many of the above work. There have been times where I have spent, hours in coffee shops writing. That's been some of my favorite writing to do, where I can be surrounded by chaos, but it's not my chaos. I'm not responsible for it. And so it can happen around me. And I like being around, people and sort of, watching people in between and doing little breaks like that. And there's certain scenes that I remember writing, and I remember where I was when I was writing it. I remember this was the coffee shop that I was in when I wrote this one. Um, Other times I write from home, which, this chaos is harder to ignore because this is the chaos I'm responsible for.
Yeah.
And so when people in this coffee shop are hungry, I actually have to attend to them. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. So my typical writing happens these days once the kids are all on their buses and off to school, and then it's just me at home with my dog, and now we have a cat we've just gotten, so they're much less needy, and they're very decent coworkers,
Sure.
actually. They keep the space quiet for me.
How would you describe your journey as a writer?
Unexpected, rather irregular. I completely was not anticipating that I would have a journey like this one. I had a certain path in mind, but I guess that's where, we can plan, but really the universe might hold surprises for all of us where, we can think we're going to do one thing, but there are other things that might be in store for us if we open those doors. And I'm really thankful for this journey. Because it has given me a chance to be in spaces and in conversations that I never would have imagined, like this one right here, right now, to be able to have this conversation with you, to be able to be part in some way of this edition that you're putting out, this curation of voices, to be able to, travel to different countries and meet with people and learn how a work of fiction, and this astonishes me, and I'll never get over it, but how a work of fiction, of imagination, can actually connect with people and have an impact. And this is something that I knew as a reader, and I don't know why I did not have the ability to see just how profound it was until I was on the writing side of it, and receiving some notes from people, to just really understand that there is so much that can be done with a story.
Are you working on something right now, a book or a short story?
I'm always working on a book, and so I'm working on something now, which is, it's too early to feel like I can give even a synopsis of it, but I'm looking forward to, next July I'll have my fifth book coming out. So that'll be City of Widows, and fifth adult book. And that one is one that is about it is about the fall of Afghanistan, but it is also one that is about the women who were living in the country at the time. In particular, a woman who was serving as one of the special forces in the military of Afghanistan in collaboration with American women. And so it's these units that really drew my interest, these women who completely stepped out of their comfort zones and took on this enormous challenge and blew stereotypes out of the water, dropping down from helicopters in the middle of the night to conduct these missions and battle the Taliban and extremism in their own country. So that will be out next July.
We look forward to the book. Achal wants to talk to you. Uh, Achal,
Yes, thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. I read your first book, and the story still it haunts you at the same time. It stays with you in some way. So thank you for writing, and every word that you have engraved on this pages. It really makes a huge impact on the reader. So firstly, thank you for all your writings. I just wanted to thank you from the Usawa team as well. There's this one last question I want to ask you as a part of that rapid fire round. If you could pass on one word to all the beginners and demigods of the world, all these imperialist power, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. This is a tough question, Anjali. You saved this one for last. One word for all these demigods. Um, oh, it's really hard to boil this one down to one word, but maybe just no. You know, I think just as one word of resistance, just no, everything, all of it, no. The types of controls that are being um, granted to them, the permission that's being granted by so many people who are witnessing this, who could actually do something about it. That's really what bothers me. It's not just that we have the demigods, but you have people who are enabling them, who are allowing this to happen. And so I think what I would love to hear would be one really raucousy, loud, enthusiastic, outraged no from the collective to say that we will not allow this to happen. We will not allow this rampant, nationalism, this violent rhetoric, this militaristic dialogue to happen in our names, on our watch, in our time. Just no.
Resounding no. I think we'll agree with that. And finally, before we wrap up, is there a message that you would like to give to writers, publishers, artists, producers hailing from conflict-ridden zones all across the world? Things are getting really, really bad for huge populations across the world. If there's a message that you would like to leave on how they can produce art, what would it be?
Their art has never been more critical. And, I say that because, again, we're going to look back on this period of history and we're going to need those voices. We're going to need their testimony to what happened, what we allowed to happen, honestly, in our time. And we also need to make sure that those experiences are prioritized in an age where we could very possibly be seeing a diluting of the written word. Every day I'm seeing more and more things that are written by AI, and you can see the inauthenticity in it. You can see how it is a manufactured, a replica of the human experience. And but unfortunately, it's becoming more and more rampant and almost it's get close to realistic. It makes it all the more important for people who are having lived experiences to share that with us. And so I would tell them, please know that we're listening. We're listening now, we'll be listening then, we'll be listening in the future. Whatever they can capture would be so important for us, because we do have to honor what these human experiences are. I think it is probably the least that we can do, the absolute least that we can do in terms of those who are facing just grave injustices, uh, violence, and the deprivation of whether it's homeland or an economy or agency or a voice, any of that. The very least that we can do is to listen.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you. And I think the slogan, no, a resounding no. We will all collectively say no. Yes, we must say no.
Yeah. I think you are doing that in part, and I'm so grateful again for this issue. So thank you to your entire team for putting this together.
Thank you. Thank you for your support and participation. It means a lot to us and our readers. All right. That was Nadia Hashimi in conversation with me, Smita Sahai, and Aanchal. And we'll end this episode of Usawa Talks here. Thank you.